World War II. You've probably heard of it. You know, an angry mustached man invades Poland, takes off another mustached man with a bigger army, somehow drags in another country, original mustache man's country gets pretty much obliterated, and one country dropped a couple of mushrooms on another. Since the USSR collapsed, most people think that the US single-handedly won the war. You've also probably only learned the war from America's perspective. But how would it be seen through Russia's point of view? And Stalin's? Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union from 1922 to 1952, he turned the Soviet Union into a global superpower. He was also a brutal dictator who killed millions of people, and when he suffered a stroke, the housekeepers and doctors were scared to go into his room. He died from that same stroke. So, here's where the story begins. It's the late 1930s. Stalin is scared. Really scared. A dictator with murdering powers that exceeds even him, Stalin, the Man of Steel, the Red Tsar, the Kremlin Highlander, has come to power in Germany. And this dictator wants to take over all of Europe. This dictator is Adolf Hitler. He ruthlessly annexes Austria and Sudetenland, which was a German-speaking area of Czechoslovakia, and then he invades Czechoslovakia. Stalin is scared that Hitler will soon invade Poland and later the Soviet Union. What do you do when you're a ruthless dictator wishing to avoid war? I don't know. I've never had that experience. But here's what the Man of Steel did. He signed a secret agreement with another dictator that was known for breaking agreements, openly said that Russians were inferior and deserved to be killed to make way for Germans, and deluded himself that Hitler and himself were best friends. And Stalin expected Hitler to keep his agreement. That was a genius move. The foreign ministers of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed what was known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. That was basically an agreement that said, hey, I'm not going to invade you or support anyone who is, and you won't do the same to me. Deal? And so the alliance, not really an alliance, more of a pact, was signed on August 23, 1939. 1 week later, on September 1st, 1939, Hitler's army invaded Poland and World War II began. Later that month, on September 17, 1939, the Soviets invaded the eastern half of Poland, and Poland effectively ceased to exist. Stalin was happy. In November, after Finland refused to give up some of its territory, Stalin's Red Army invaded Finland. The Finns put up a good fight, but they fell to the USSR 3 months later. The Finnish army inflicted about 350,000 casualties on the Soviet army, while only sustaining about 70,000 casualties on their own side. Stalin was extremely upset about this. The fierceness of the Finnish resistance and the high casualties on the Soviet side lowered the Red Army's prestige. Plus, it also encouraged Hitler to attack the Soviets, since, in his eyes, if they couldn't even win against Finland without losing an inordinate amount of soldiers, how could they stand a chance against the Wehrmacht, the mighty German army that conquered France in a month? Back to the war. Throughout the rest of 1940 and into the middle of 1941, Hitler drew the map of Europe how he liked it, with Nazi Germany controlling practically everything while Stalin took over the rest of Eastern Europe. The Axis powers effectively ruled the entire continent of Europe, with the exception of the Iberian Peninsula, the Soviet Union, and Switzerland. Now, it's June of 1941. It's pretty obvious that the German military is preparing to invade Russia. They're amassing at the Soviet border, telegrams are intercepted that show Hitler's preparing to break the agreement, you know, the usual. Stalin ignored this. He thought this was all a plot. Oh yes, a devious plot devised by the Brits. So Stalin said, "Убить некоторых генералов," or in English, kill some generals. Oh wait, he already did. He killed some more. And he will continue killing them even after getting invaded by Hitler in what would be known as the Great Purge. This left his army deprived of top talent, further weakening the Soviet army. Finally, on June 22, 1941, Germany commenced Operation Barbarossa. They invaded Russia. When told about the invasion, according to some historians, the Man of Steel suffered a nervous breakdown and hid himself in his room. Then, as the German army advanced, Stalin showed the world why he was named the Man of Steel. He ordered the generals to shoot anyone who deserted, to burn all crops and factories, and to fight to the death. This wasn't nearly enough though. The Germans kept on advancing. 6 months later, in December of 1941, the 250th Infantry Division got to within 15 miles, or 24 kilometers, of Moscow. The German army could see the spires of the Kremlin. Stalin was ready to evacuate himself and the rest of the government to Yekaterinburg and Kuybyshev. Incidentally, those were the two airports at which Aeroflot Flight 6502, the plane that crashed because the pilot made a bet he could do a blind landing, landed and crashed. That video is linked in the description below. Then, on December 5th, 1941, Stalin ordered a counteroffensive. He called in Siberian ski troops, and then in a month, they forced the German army back about 100 miles, or 160 kilometers, from Moscow. Stalin was still scared at how close the German Wehrmacht came to taking over Moscow, and with it, the Soviet Union. The repulsion of German forces from Moscow's vicinity was a top priority for Stalin at this time and through the rest of the war. On December 7th, 1941, naval and air forces belonging to the Empire of Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. This dragged the US into the war, which was giving weapons to the USSR through the Lend-Lease program. Stalin doesn't get involved in fighting Japan for now. He'll only do so days before Japan informally surrenders. For now, he wants to beat Nazi Germany, and he's willing to sustain millions of casualties. So that's World War II from the Russian point of view. Part 2 will be released soon. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out. If you liked the video, then press the like button. If you didn't like the video, then press the dislike button twice, and then for good measure, press the like button. Thank you for watching Explained. New videos every other Friday.